I should have known something was off the moment Greg's mother, Marion, showed up unannounced at our house. The two of them thought they were being discreet, huddled in the study with the door closed, but their hushed tones carried through the hallway. "You have to tell her," Marion hissed. "Evelyn deserves to know the truth." My heart pounded as I pressed my ear against the door, straining to make out Greg's muffled response. "Wasn't supposed to happen? Mistake. Can't lose everything." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stumbled back, my mind racing. What truth was Marion talking about? What had Greg done? As the pieces started to fall into place, memories of Greg's late nights at the office and unexplained absences flooded back to me. The signs had been there all along, but I had been too blinded by love and trust to see them. The door swung open, and Greg froze when he saw me standing there. His face drained of color, and I knew in that moment that my life was about to change forever. "Evelyn, I can explain," he began, but I held up a hand to silence him. "Don't bother," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "I heard enough." Marion averted her gaze, shame etched into her features. She had known about Greg's deception and kept it from me, her own daughter-in-law. "How could you?" I asked, looking between the two of them. "After everything we've been through, how could you betray me like this?" Greg reached for me, but I recoiled from his touch. "It's not what you think," he pleaded. "It was a mistake, a one-time thing that happened years ago." My mind raced, trying to process his words. A one-time thing? That didn't explain the secrecy, the lies, the guilt written all over their faces. "Tell me the truth," I demanded, my voice growing stronger. "I deserve to know what's really going on." Greg exchanged a pained look with his mother before turning back to me. I have a child from an affair I had years ago." The room spun around me as the weight of his confession sank in. A child. Greg had fathered a child with another woman, and they had both kept it from me for God knows how long. "How could you do this to our family?" I choked out, tears stinging my eyes. "How could you lie to me for all these years?" Greg tried to explain, to justify his actions, but his words fell on deaf ears. The man I had loved, the man I had built a life with, was a stranger to me now. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The hurt and betrayal gave way to a burning determination. I would not be a victim in this story. I would not let Greg's deceit define me. "Get out," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "Both of you, get out of my house." Marion opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "No, you don't get to speak, not after you enabled this for who knows how long." Greg looked at me, pleading, but I had made up my mind. The life we had built together was over, and it was time for me to start writing a new chapter, one where I took control of my own destiny. As they left, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. The road ahead would be long and painful, but I was ready to face it head on. Greg's betrayal had shattered my world, but it would not break me. I was Evelyn Parker, and I was just getting started. After kicking Greg and his mother out of the house, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a steely resolve to uncover the full extent of Greg's deception. I paced the living room, my mind racing. How could he have done this to me, to our family? The man I thought I knew was nothing but a lie. The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my thoughts. Greg stood in the doorway, his expression a mix of guilt and desperation. "Evelyn, please let me explain," he pleaded, taking a step towards me. I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "Explain what, Greg? How you've been lying to me for years. How you fathered a child with another woman." His shoulders slumped, and he averted his gaze. "It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" I scoffed. "You have a child, Greg. A living, breathing human being that you've been keeping from me and our daughters." He flinched at the mention of our girls, and I felt a pang of guilt for the pain this would inevitably cause them. But they deserved to know the truth about their father. "I never meant to hurt you," Greg said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was going to tell you, I swear." "When, Greg?" I demanded. "When were you going to tell me that our entire marriage has been built on lies?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. We both knew there was no good answer, no justification for what he had done. "Get out," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. I don't want to see your face again until you're ready to come clean about everything." Greg looked like he wanted to protest, but something in my expression must have stopped him. He turned and left without another word, the weight of his betrayal hanging heavy in the air. As the door closed behind him, I sank onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? Just a few hours ago, my life had been perfect, or so I thought. The sound of footsteps made me look up. Marion stood in the doorway, her expression a mix of shame and pity. "I'm so sorry, Evelyn," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I should have told you the truth from the beginning." I stared at her, my anger reigniting. "You knew? You knew about Greg's affair and his child, and you said nothing?" She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I wanted to protect my son, to protect our family, but I see now that I was only enabling his lies." "You're damn right you were," I snapped, rising to my feet, "and in the process, you betrayed me just as much as he did." Marion flinched at the venom in my words, but she didn't try to defend herself. She knew there was no excuse for her actions. "I never meant to hurt you, Evelyn," she said softly. "You've been like a daughter to me, and I've failed you in the worst way." Her words did little to soothe the ache in my heart. But as I looked at her, I saw a woman consumed by guilt and regret, and I knew that her punishment would be living with the consequences of her choices. "Just go," I said, my voice weary. "I can't deal with either of you right now." Marion nodded, her shoulders slumped in defeat. As she turned to leave, she paused and looked back at me. "For what it's worth, I'm on your side now," she said. "Whatever you need, I'll help you get the justice you deserve." I didn't respond, watching in silence as she left. Her offer rang hollow in my ears. The only thing I wanted was to go back in time, to a place where my life hadn't been shattered by the people I loved most. But that was impossible. All I could do now was pick up the pieces and try to rebuild something from the wreckage of my marriage. And if that meant seeking revenge on Greg, so be it. After Greg and Marion left, I felt utterly alone. The life I had built, the family I thought I had, it was all a lie. I needed someone in my corner, someone who could help me make sense of this nightmare. Loretta, my best friend, would know what to do. She had been through her own marital hell years ago, when her husband cheated. If anyone could understand the pain and betrayal I was feeling, it was her. I dialed her number with shaking hands, the tears I had been holding back finally spilling over. "Evelyn, what's wrong?" Loretta's concerned voice came through the line. I tried to speak, but the words caught in my throat. How could I even begin to explain the depths of Greg's deception? "It's Greg," I managed finally. He had an affair. And there's a child, Loretta. He has a child with another woman." There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Oh, honey," Loretta said softly. "I'm so sorry. I'm coming over right now, okay?" Relief washed over me. I needed Loretta's strength now more than ever. True to her word, she arrived at my doorstep 20 minutes later, enveloping me in a fierce hug as soon as I opened the door. "Tell me everything," she said, her voice gentle but firm as she led me to the couch. So I did. I poured out the whole sordid story, overhearing Greg and Marion's conversation, the revelations about his affair and secret child, his feeble attempts at justification. Loretta listened intently, her expression growing darker with each new detail. "That lying son of a bitch," she spat when I finished. "How could he do this to you, to your family?" I shook my head, feeling numb. I don't know. I thought our marriage was solid, that we were happy. But clearly I was just deluding myself. Loretta took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You are not to blame here, Evelyn. This is all on Greg and his selfish, despicable actions." Her words ignited a spark of determination within me. She was right. I wasn't the one who had betrayed our vows, our family. Greg was the one who had shattered everything we had built together. "I need to know the full truth," I said, my voice hardening. "I need to know every sordid detail of his affair, every lie he's told me over the years." Loretta nodded, her expression resolute. "Then that's what we'll do. We'll dig into this thing until we uncover every last secret Greg has been keeping from you." A sense of purpose washed over me. I was done being the victim in this story. It was time to take control and seek the justice I deserved. Over the next few days, Loretta and I became amateur detectives, scouring through Greg's emails, bank statements, anything that could shed light on his double life. and what we found only deepened the wound of his betrayal. Receipts for expensive jewelry and hotel stays. Tender emails exchanged with his mistress, filled with promises of a future together. Bank transfers to an account I had never known about, siphoning off money that should have been going to our family. With each new revelation, the man I thought I knew became more and more of a stranger. But the pain was tempered by a growing sense of determination. Greg had made his bed, and now it was time for him to lie in it. The final piece of the puzzle came in the form of a letter tucked away in a box of Greg's old things in the attic. It was from his mistress, Angela, written years ago, but still dripping with venom. "You promised we would be together," it read. "You promised to leave your wife and build a life with me and our son, but you were just using me, using us, and I'll never forgive you for that." Our son. The words hit me like a physical blow. So it was true. Greg had a child out there, a living, breathing human being that he had rejected and abandoned. As I read the letter again, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about Greg's betrayal of me anymore. It was about the lives he had destroyed, the innocent people he had hurt in his selfish pursuit of gratification. I looked at Loretta, my eyes blazing with a newfound sense of purpose. "We need to find this Angela," I said, my voice steely with determination. "And we need to make Greg pay for what he's done." Loretta nodded, a grim smile playing across her lips. "Whatever it takes, Evelyn. That bastard is going to wish he never crossed us." The path ahead was long and uncertain, but one thing was clear. Greg's web of lies was about to unravel, and I would be the one holding the scissors. Just when I thought the worst was over, the universe decided to throw another curveball my way. Jessica and Laura, my 2 daughters, came home for their regular weekend visit, blissfully unaware of the turmoil that had erupted in our family. As soon as they walked through the door, I could sense something was off. The usual warmth and laughter were replaced by a palpable tension that hung thick in the air. "Mom, is everything okay?" Jessica asked, ever the perceptive one. I forced a smile, not wanting to burden them with the truth just yet. "Of course, honey, why wouldn't it be?" Laura frowned, her brow furrowing. "Where's Dad? He's usually here to greet us." My heart clenched at the mention of Greg. How could I possibly explain his betrayal to our daughters, the 2 people he had sworn to love and protect above all else? "Your father," I began, but the words stuck in my throat. Jessica's eyes narrowed, and she exchanged a worried glance with her sister. "Mom, what's going on? You're scaring us." In that moment, I knew I couldn't keep them in the dark any longer. They deserved to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. "Girls, there's something I need to tell you," I said, gesturing for them to sit down. "It's about your father." I proceeded to lay out the sordid details of Greg's affair and the existence of his illegitimate child. With each revelation, their expressions morphed from confusion to disbelief to utter devastation. "No, that can't be true," Laura whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Dad would never do something like that." Jessica, ever the strong one, clenched her jaw, her eyes blazing with anger. "That lying bastard," she spat. "How could he do this to us, to our family?" I reached out to comfort them, but Laura recoiled from my touch, her body shaking with sobs. In that moment, I felt utterly helpless, unable to shield my daughters from the pain their father had inflicted upon us all. The sound of the front door opening made us all turn. Greg stood in the entryway, his expression a mix of guilt and apprehension. "Girls, I can explain," he began, but Jessica cut him off with a withering glare. "Save it, Dad," she snarled. "We know all about your little secret family." Greg flinched as if he'd been struck, his gaze shifting to me accusingly. "Evelyn, why would you tell them?" "They didn't need to know." "Didn't need to know?" I echoed incredulously. "They're your daughters, Greg. They deserve the truth, no matter how ugly it might be." Laura rose to her feet, her eyes red-rimmed but her expression hardening. "How could you do this to us, Dad? To Mom? We trusted you, and you betrayed us in the worst way possible." Greg opened his mouth, but no words came out. For once, the man who had spun a web of lies for years was rendered speechless. "I think you should leave," Jessica said, her voice low and dangerous. "We don't want you here right now." Greg looked like he wanted to protest, but one glance at the fury etched on our faces must have convinced him otherwise. He turned and left without another word, the weight of his actions hanging heavy in the air. As the door closed behind him, I gathered my daughters in a fierce embrace, our tears mingling together. In that moment, we were united in our pain and betrayal, like a bond forged by the man who had sworn to love and protect us above all else. "We'll get through this together," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "Greg may have shattered our family, but he hasn't broken us." Jessica and Laura clung to me, their bodies shaking with sobs. But beneath the pain, I could sense a steely resolve taking root, a determination to make Greg pay for what he had done, no matter the cost. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but we would face it as a united front. Greg's lies had torn us apart, but they had also brought us closer together than ever before. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would emerge stronger and more resilient than ever before. In the aftermath of Greg's betrayal, I found myself at a crossroads. Part of me wanted to curl up and lick my wounds, to retreat from the world that had so thoroughly shattered my illusions, but a stronger, more defiant part of me knew that I couldn't let Greg's actions define me. I needed to take control, to seek justice not just for myself, but for all the lives he had so carelessly upended. That's when I remembered Angela, Greg's former mistress, the woman he had used and discarded like a piece of trash. If anyone understood the depths of his deception, it was her. Tracking her down wasn't easy, but Loretta's investigative skills proved invaluable. After weeks of digging, we finally uncovered an address in a modest neighborhood across town. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Loretta asked as we pulled up to the nondescript house. "This woman has every reason to hate you." I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve. "I have to try. She's the only one who can help me understand the full scope of what Greg has done." Loretta gave me a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder before I made my way up the cracked sidewalk to the front door. With trembling fingers, I rang the bell. The door swung open, and a woman with tired eyes and a guarded expression stood before me. Even without an introduction, I knew this was Angela. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone laced with suspicion. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "My name is Evelyn Parker. I'm Greg's wife." Her expression hardened, and for a moment I thought she might slam the door in my face. But then something shifted in her eyes, a glimmer of recognition, of shared pain. "I see," she said finally. "I suppose you're here about our son." Our son. The words hit me like a physical blow, but I refused to let my emotions show. "Among other things, yes. May I come in?" Angela hesitated for a moment before stepping aside, allowing me to enter the modest living room. As I took a seat on the well-worn couch, a teenage boy emerged from one of the bedrooms, his features a striking blend of Greg's and Angela's. "Tobias, this is Evelyn," Angela said, her voice softening as she addressed her son. She's your father's wife." Tobias's eyes widened, and he regarded me with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. In that moment, I saw the weight of Greg's actions reflected in his eyes, the burden of being an unwanted secret, a constant reminder of his father's betrayal. "I won't beat around the bush," I said, turning my attention back to Angela. "I know about Greg's affair, and I know about Tobias. What I don't know is the full extent of his lies and manipulation." Angela's expression hardened once more, and she let out a bitter laugh. "Where do I even begin? Greg promised me the world. He said he would leave you, that we could be a real family. But it was all lies, just another way for him to get what he wanted without any real consequences." As she spoke, the pieces began to fall into place. Greg's frequent business trips, his unexplained absences, they had all been part of his double life, a life he had so carefully constructed to keep us all in the dark. "He left me to raise Tobias alone," Angela continued, her voice thick with emotion. "No child support, no acknowledgement of his existence, just empty promises and a lifetime of pain." I reached out and took her hand, my own eyes stinging with tears. "I'm so sorry," I said, the words feeling woefully inadequate. "You didn't deserve any of this." Angela squeezed my hand, her expression softening. "Neither did you, Evelyn. We were both victims of Greg's selfish games." In that moment, I knew what I had to do. Greg had torn our lives apart, but in doing so, he had also forged an unlikely bond between Angela, Tobias, and myself, a bond born of shared betrayal and a thirst for justice. "We can't let him get away with this," I said, my voice hardening with resolve. "He needs to pay for what he's done to all of us." Angela nodded, her eyes blazing with determination. "I'm with you, Evelyn. It's time we made Greg face the consequences of his actions once and for all." Tobias stepped forward, his jaw set in a defiant line. "Count me in too. I want to know why my own father abandoned me, why he treated me like a dirty secret." In that moment, an unlikely alliance was formed. 3 people united by a common goal: to make Greg answer for his lies and seek the justice we all so desperately craved. It would be a long and difficult road, but together we were stronger than the web of deceit he had spun. As I looked at Angela and Tobias, I saw not just allies, but kindred spirits, people who had been wronged in the most profound way, but who refused to let that define them. We were survivors, fighters, and we would not rest until Greg's carefully constructed facade came crumbling down around him. The battle lines had been drawn, and there was no turning back. Greg had made his choices, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. With Angela and Tobias as unlikely allies, a plan began to take shape. We would confront Greg, lay bare the full extent of his lies and betrayal, and force him to face the consequences of his actions. But we couldn't do it alone. We needed to expose his web of deceit to the people closest to him, the ones he had so carefully kept in the dark. That's when Marion re-entered the picture. Despite her initial complicity in protecting Greg, she had ultimately chosen to stand by my side. Her eyes finally opened to the depths of her son's depravity. Together, we would make Greg's carefully constructed facade come crumbling down around him. The confrontation was set for a Sunday afternoon at a local restaurant, a public setting where Greg's lies would be laid bare for all to see. As Angela, Tobias, and I took our seats, my heart pounded with a mix of nervous anticipation and righteous fury. Greg arrived a few minutes later, his brow furrowed in confusion when he saw our unlikely gathering. "Evelyn, what's going on here?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. Before I could respond, Marion stepped forward, her expression one of steely determination. "It's time you faced the truth, Gregory," she said, using his full name in a rare display of seriousness. "These people know everything about your lies, your betrayal, and they're here to make sure you can't hide from it any longer." Greg's eyes widened as he took in Angela and Tobias, realization dawning on his features. "You," he stammered, pointing an accusatory finger at Angela. "What lies have you been telling my wife?" Angela met his gaze unflinchingly. "The only lies here are the ones you've been spinning for years, Greg. It's time you owned up to the fact that you have a son, a child you abandoned without a second thought." Tobias stepped forward, his jaw set in a defiant line. "I'm not a secret anymore, Dad. I'm here in the flesh, and I want answers. Why did you leave us? Why did you treat me like I didn't even exist?" Greg's eyes darted around the restaurant, panic setting in as he realized the scene we were causing. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered. "Evelyn, you can't honestly believe these people over your own husband." I rose to my feet, my hands balled into fists at my sides. "Don't you dare try to play the victim here, Greg. I know everything, the affairs, the lies, the secret bank accounts. You've been living a double life for years, and it's time you paid the price for it." Greg opened his mouth to respond, but Marion cut him off, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "Don't even try to deny it, son," she spat. "I've seen the evidence with my own eyes. You've disgraced our family, disgraced everything we stand for, all for your own selfish desires." The restaurant had fallen silent, all eyes trained on our explosive confrontation. Greg looked around wildly, his carefully cultivated persona crumbling before our very eyes. "You're all delusional?" he snarled, his composure finally cracking. "Evelyn, how could you believe these people over me, your own husband?" I met his gaze, my eyes hard and unyielding. "Because they're not the ones who betrayed me, Greg. You are, and now everyone is going to know exactly what kind of man you really are." With those words, the dam broke. Angela, Tobias, and I laid out the sordid details of Greg's double life, his lies and manipulations, his utter disregard for the people he had sworn to love and protect. And with each damning revelation, Greg's protests grew weaker, his excuses more feeble. By the time we were finished, the entire restaurant was enveloped in a stunned silence. Greg stood alone, his reputation in tatters, his carefully constructed facade shattered beyond repair. As he turned to leave, his shoulders slumped in defeat, Marion called out to him one final time. "You've made your bed, Gregory," she said, her voice laced with disappointment and regret. "Now you can lie in it, alone." And just like that, the man who had once been the center of my world was gone, reduced to a mere shadow of the person I thought I had known. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of liberation, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. With Greg's lies had nearly destroyed me, but in the end, they had only made me stronger. With Angela, Tobias, and my newfound support system at my side, I was ready to start rebuilding my life on my own terms, a life free from the shackles of deception and betrayal. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Greg had played his games, spun his lies, but in the end, the truth had prevailed. And as I looked around at the faces of my allies, my family, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, united by our shared strength and resilience. The battle had been won, but the war was just beginning. And this time, I was the one calling the shots. In the aftermath of our explosive confrontation with Greg, the shockwaves rippled through every aspect of our lives. His carefully constructed facade had been shattered, leaving him exposed and vulnerable in a way I had never seen before. Within days, the news of his betrayal had spread like wildfire through our social circles. Friends and acquaintances who had once admired and respected him now looked upon him with a mix of disgust and pity. Greg's reputation, the very thing he had worked so hard to cultivate, was in tatters. But as Greg's world crumbled around him, mine was just beginning to rebuild. With Angela, Tobias, and my newfound support system at my side, I felt a sense of empowerment and purpose that had been missing for far too long. Marion, once Greg's staunchest defender, was now one of my closest allies. The guilt and shame she felt over enabling her son's lies had given way to a fierce determination to make amends, to stand by my side as I navigated this new chapter of my life. "I failed you, Evelyn," she said to me one afternoon, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I let my blind devotion to Gregory cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I betrayed the woman who has been like a daughter to me." I reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "What's done is done, Marion. All we can do now is move forward together." She nodded, her expression resolute. "You have my word, Evelyn. From this day forward, I will be the ally and support system you deserve. Gregory has made his choices, and now he must face the consequences." True to her word, Marion became a pillar of strength in the days and weeks that followed. As Greg's desperate attempts to reconcile were met with stony silence from all corners, she stood firm in her rejection of his pleas. "You brought this upon yourself, son," she told him during one particularly heated exchange. "You betrayed not just Evelyn, but this entire family. And for what? A fleeting moment of selfish pleasure?" Greg, once so confident and self-assured, withered under his mother's withering gaze. It was a stark reminder of just how far he had fallen, how thoroughly his lies had alienated him from those who had once been his biggest supporters. As for me, I found myself buoyed by a newfound sense of independence and purpose. The job I had once seen as a mere means to an end had taken on a new significance, a way for me to assert my self-worth and financial independence. It was during this time that an unexpected opportunity presented itself. A managerial position, one that would not only provide greater financial security, but also a chance to prove my leadership capabilities. "You've more than earned this, Evelyn," my boss told me as she extended the offer. "Your resilience and determination in the face of such personal turmoil have been an inspiration to us all." I accepted without hesitation, relishing the chance to take control of my own destiny. No longer would I be defined by Greg's actions or the life he had tried to force upon me. This was my chance to forge my own path, to show the world that I was more than just a victim of circumstance. As I settled into my new role, I found myself drawing strength from the support system that had rallied around me. Angela, once a bitter rival, had become a trusted confidant, her own experiences with Greg's betrayal giving her a unique perspective on the challenges I faced. "We're survivors, Evelyn," she told me one evening as we shared a bottle of wine. "Greg tried to break us, but in the end, he only made us stronger." Tobias, too, had become an integral part of my life, a constant reminder of the collateral damage wrought by Greg's selfish actions. As he navigated the turbulent waters of adolescence, I found myself drawn to his quiet strength and resilience, qualities that had been forged in the fires of his father's abandonment. Together, we formed an unlikely family unit, bound not by blood but by a shared experience of betrayal and a determination to rise above it. And as the months passed, I found myself looking to the future with a sense of hope and optimism that had been sorely lacking for far too long. Greg's desperate attempts to worm his way back into our lives were met with a united front of indifference and disdain. He had made his choices, and now he would have to live with the consequences, a life spent on the fringes, a mere shadow of the man he had once been. As for me, I was done living in his shadow. With each passing day, I felt myself growing stronger, more confident in my ability to forge my own path. The scars of Greg's betrayal would never fully heal, but they had become a badge of honor, a testament to my resilience and determination to rise above the ashes of my former life. And as I looked ahead to the future, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, surrounded by the love and support of those who had become my true family. A family forged not by blood, but by the fires of adversity and the unbreakable bonds of sisterhood. In the months that followed Greg's downfall, a profound shift took place within our unlikely sisterhood. What had begun as a shared mission of revenge and retribution evolved into something far more profound, a movement dedicated to empowering and supporting women who had faced similar betrayals. It started small, with Loretta, Angela, Marion, and I meeting for weekly coffee dates, sharing our stories and offering each other the kind of understanding and solidarity that could only come from those who had walked the same painful path. But word soon spread, and before long, our little gathering had grown into a full-fledged support group, a safe haven for women seeking to rebuild their lives in the aftermath of betrayal. "We're more than just survivors," Loretta declared at one of our early meetings. "We're warriors, fighters who have stared down the darkness and emerged stronger on the other side." Her words resonated deeply with all of us, a rallying cry for the resilience and determination that had carried us through our darkest hours. We were no longer victims, defined by the actions of the men who had wronged us. We were women in control of our own destinies, forging new paths on our own terms. As our numbers grew, so too did our sense of purpose. We began organizing workshops and seminars, sharing our stories, and offering practical advice on everything from navigating the legal system to rebuilding self-esteem in the wake of emotional trauma. Marion, ever the matriarch, took a particular interest in mentoring the younger women in our group, offering a wisdom and perspective that could only come from a lifetime of experience. "You are not defined by the actions of others," she would say, her voice firm but laced with warmth. "You are strong, capable women with the power to shape your own futures." Angela, too, became a driving force within our movement, her own experiences with Greg's betrayal lending a raw authenticity to her words. She and Tobias formed an unbreakable bond, a living testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. "We may have been dealt a tough hand," Angela would tell our group, her arm draped protectively around her son's shoulders, "but it's up to us to decide how we play the cards we're given." As for me, I found myself drawn into a leadership role almost by default. My story, the public unraveling of Greg's lies, had become a rallying cry for women seeking to reclaim their power and agency. And as my newfound confidence and independence blossomed, so too did my determination to use my platform to inspire and empower others. "We are not victims," I would say, my voice ringing out with conviction. "We are survivors, warriors who have faced down the darkness and emerged stronger on the other side." My words seemed to strike a chord, resonating with women from all walks of life who had found themselves betrayed and belittled by the men who were supposed to love and cherish them. And as our movement grew, so too did the sense of sisterhood and solidarity that bound us together. Jessica and Laura, my own daughters, became active participants in our group, their own experiences with their father's betrayal fueling a fierce determination to support and uplift other women facing similar struggles. It was a source of immense pride for me, watching them channel their pain into a force for positive change. "We may have been dealt a tough hand," Laura would say, echoing Angela's words. But we're not going to let it define us. We're going to use it as fuel to build something better, something stronger. And build we did. What had started as a small gathering of wounded souls quickly blossomed into a powerful movement, a force for change and empowerment that stretched far beyond the confines of our little support group. We organized fundraisers and awareness campaigns, partnering with local shelters and advocacy organizations to provide resources and support for women in crisis. We lobbied for stronger legal protections and harsher penalties for those who perpetrated emotional and financial abuse. And through it all, we remained a tight-knit sisterhood, bound by our shared experiences and an unwavering commitment to lifting each other up. We celebrated each other's triumphs, big and small, and offered a shoulder to lean on during the inevitable setbacks and challenges. As for Greg, he had become little more than a footnote in our lives, a cautionary tale of what happens when selfishness and deceit are allowed to fester unchecked. His desperate attempts to reconcile or insert himself back into our lives were met with a wall of indifference, a stark reminder that he had forfeited his place in our world the moment he chose to betray us. In the end, his legacy would be one of pain and disappointment, a cautionary tale of what happens when a man puts his own desires above the well-being of those he claims to love. But our legacy, the legacy of the women he had wronged, would be one of resilience, strength, and unwavering sisterhood. As I looked around at the faces of the women who had become my chosen family, I felt a profound sense of gratitude and pride. We had been through hell and back, but we had emerged on the other side stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but one thing was clear. We would face it together, united by our shared experiences and an unbreakable bond of sisterhood. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would meet them head-on, armed with the knowledge that we were warriors, survivors who had stared down the darkness and emerged victorious.